girl, I installed myself as queen of the castle. It was just a few miles from where my family still live. It's called Loch Doon Castle. And in the summertime, we would go there for picnics. And while my family were setting up the picnic by the edge of the lake, I would go to the secret place that I had discovered that no one else seemed to know anything about. One of the remaining turrets in the castle had a huge fireplace. And what I could do, because I was fairly agile, is I could put my back against the wall of one side of the chimney and my feet against the other, and gradually I could climb all the way up to the top of the chimney and out onto the wall of the castle. I would sit there and look out over the ocean, and I was a different girl up there. Up there, I wasn't the girl whose dad died in a shameful way that no one wanted to talk about. Up there, I wasn't the girl who only had one pair of shoes. Up there, I was Sheila, warrior princess. But then I would hear my sister Frances calling from down below, Sheila, come on, it's time to go. If Mum sees where you are, you will be in big trouble. So I had to climb back down from that wonderful place to a land where disappointment lives. I'm sure you know what that's like. I'm sure you've had many things that you had great hopes for that turned quickly to disappointment. What I want us to see in this session is that God has an amazing way of turning disappointment back into hope. Heartbroken is an overused word in our culture, whether in chick flicks or daytime television, but at its very core, the definition speaks to unimaginable loss. It speaks to being out of control. Well, as women, that's hard for us to come to terms with. We want to be able to impact the outcome of a situation, to do something to help. But there are times in life when honestly there's absolutely nothing we can do, at least nothing that seems enough. That's when sorrow floods in. We feel heartbroken because we can't change the situation. We can't help. The Bible is brutally honest about the reality of heartbreak. Just think of Job. My heart is troubled and restless. Days of suffering torment me. I walk in gloom without sunlight. I stand in the public square and cry for help. Can you hear the absolute desolation there? In the Psalms, David says, "Oh God, my rock, I cry, why have you forgotten me? Why must I wander around in grief, oppressed by my enemies? Their taunts break my bones. They scoff, where is this God of yours?" Here the heartache is even more profound because it seems as if heaven is silent. Have you ever been there? I know I have. So let's look together at a woman in the Old Testament who experienced tremendous sorrow, but she also found profound, life-changing hope and strength by surrendering her deepest heartbreak to God. That one decision changed her life. For a woman, the inability to have children has to be one of the most profound, primal heartaches there is. Well, just ask Hannah. Hannah's story is found in 1 Samuel. When we're first introduced to her, this is how she's described. Elkanah had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. That's how Hannah was known to her entire community. It's a devastating reality in our time, but in Hannah's time, it totally defined a woman. Barrenness was seen as a curse and a sign of God's displeasure. And not only that, there would be huge family pressure to produce a son, an heir, to carry on the family name. Elkanah was the fifth generation of a very strong family. They were counting on Hannah to deliver the sixth son. Carrying on the family name was so crucial in those days that Moses had actually introduced what was known as Levirate law. We read about it in Deuteronomy chapter 25. This law stated that if a man died and had produced no heir, his brother had to marry his sister-in-law and produce a son who would preserve the dead brother's name. So with no male heir, a woman in those days had little worth. Every time she would be at a family gathering or walking in the market, she wore the badge of childlessness like a neon sign around her neck. The one thing that she longed to give her husband, she couldn't. Not only that, but someone else, Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife, could and did. We read in 1 Samuel that Hannah lived in evil days where most people gave little thought to the laws that God had given to Moses for the children of Israel. Polygamy, as you know, having more than one wife, had become acceptable. As we read, Elkanah had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. It's likely that Hannah was the first wife, but after years of producing no heir, Elkanah married again. Well, his new wife was very fertile. She was able to give birth to many children, boys and girls, but she was also a very hard-hearted and cruel woman. Rather than comforting and supporting Hannah, Peninnah simply added to Hannah's pain. The harassment went on for years. We read in 1 Samuel, so Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. How cruel. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? Rather than share her children with Hannah and try to ease her burden, she used the very gifts of God to add to Hannah's pain. Heartache comes in many forms. For you, it might be the loss of a marriage, or the reality that time is ticking on and there is no Prince Charming in the wings. It might be your health, or that the child you raised in the church now wants nothing to do with God. The unpacking of heartache is different for every woman, but at some point in our lives, it's delivered to every one of our doors. What I find challenging and beautiful about Hannah's life is that even though her heart was broken, although she felt she had failed as a woman, despite the relentless tauntings of another, her faith in God remained intact. So you might want to say, well, what was Hannah's secret? Hannah's secret was simple and profound and life-changing. She knew where to take her pain. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord, and she made this vow: O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime. This was not the first time Hannah had prayed this prayer. I'm sure she poured out her soul to God year after year. And even when God seemed silent, listen, this is huge, girls. Even when God seemed silent, she continued to take her heartache to him. As you read her prayer, it might appear that Hannah is trying to make some kind of deal with God. You know, you do this for me and I'll do this for you. I don't believe for one moment that's what Hannah was doing. I believe that Hannah was making a vow. Hannah had come to a place inside of her soul and spirit where she was ready to surrender what mattered most to her in life to God, because he is worth it. And in that place, she found strength and she found peace. That's a sobering, holy place. I mean, imagine taking whatever is your biggest heartache, your most treasured dream, and surrendering it to your Heavenly Father. What a beautiful offering of your life. What a fragrance that must be to God. Well, Eli the priest saw Hannah praying, but at first he misunderstood what she was doing. She was praying with such desperation, but although her lips moved, there was no sound coming out of her mouth. So Eli thought she was drunk. Some commentators see that as a sign of Eli's godliness, that he rebuked what appeared to be inappropriate behavior in the temple. I see it more as a sign of the times they were living in. Hannah lived in a day where holiness had taken a backseat to self-indulgence. Not so different from the days we are living in. It had probably been quite some time since Eli had seen anyone pray with passion. Poor Hannah. Even in the house of God, she found no comfort from the very one who was supposed to be her link to her Heavenly Father. But when Eli understood his mistake, he gave her his blessing. In that case, Eli said, "Go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him." And with that, Hannah returned home and became pregnant with a boy. She called that boy Samuel, which means name of God or offspring of God. When Samuel was about 3 or 4 years old, Hannah fulfilled her vow to God and brought her son Samuel to Eli to serve God for the rest of his life. She didn't just do it, she did it with joy. All Hannah had ever wanted was a son, and now she had this beautiful boy. Can you imagine for a moment how she must have felt, being granted her heart's desire for a son, and then knowing that the vow she had made to God had to be kept? Here's what's huge in this story, and it's why I believe that earlier she was making a vow and not a deal. Interestingly, Hannah legally had a way to get out of her vow. All she needed to do was to ask her husband, who adored her, to refuse to accept the vow she made, and she was home free. Not simply home free, but forgiven by God. It was part of the law given to Moses to help govern the people. Listen to this. It says, if a husband learns of her vow or pledge and does not object on the day he hears of it, her vows and pledges will stand. But if her husband refuses to accept her vow or impulsive pledge on the day he hears of it, he nullifies her commitment, and the Lord will forgive her. Hannah clearly chose to honor her vow to God, to honor God with the request he had granted her. What Hannah had discovered was the joy of surrender, even in her deepest heartache. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life. And they worshiped the Lord there. Then Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. Now I have an answer from my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me." Nothing in life gives such inexplicable peace and strength more than that total surrender to God. What Hannah discovered was one of the greatest secrets the enemy would love to keep us from. What our hearts really desire above everything else is to know God, to know that He loves us and He hears every single prayer and He understands the depth of our pain. As David wrote, "You, O Lord, you have turned my mourning into joyful dancing. You have taken away my clothes of mourning and clothed me with joy, that I may sing praises to you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give you thanks forever." For now, we can extinguish the fiery darts of the enemy by worshipping, even as the storm still rages around us. It's one of the greatest lessons I've learned in the last few years. The joy of worshipping in the middle of the storm, where there's still no light on the horizon, because we trust in God. He is worth it. When we trust in Him, we move from broken to strong. And with Hannah, we can pray, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. Now I have an answer for my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me." I don't know what kind of heartache has blown in as a storm in your life. I don't know what disappointment you are facing. But with Hannah, I encourage you to take the thing that you think is the thing you desire more than anything else and discover the joy that comes in surrendering to God. We're not surrendering to someone who is cruel and doesn't understand our hearts. We're surrendering to a God who loves us. And then with Hannah, we will know that in surrender comes amazing strength.